What's the most morally questionable thing you've ever done but would never admit to in real life? I had an addict uncle who kept getting let out of jail. He was trying to rob Granny's house. I told him I had a one-time job that was 6 hours away. I drove 6 hours away, stopped at gas station, and gave him $50 to go get snacks. Then I drove off and left him. Story 2. I got laid off in 2009 and couldn't find work for almost 2 years. Found a job in the industry I loved, motorcycles, and they took advantage of my obvious desperation. Came in as an operations coordinator at $11 per hour after 4 wires working as a business analyst, directly under a VP at Citrix. Worked my ass off and within 6 months was doing the job of an operations manager analyst. I developed, supported the backbone of nearly every department's analytics. My manager didn't like me, BC. She saw me as a threat to her job. Her boss's boss, the COO, knew the value I offered for practically nothing. So, being the good executive leader she was, blocked every attempt at promotions or department transfer opportunity that came my way. IT, marketing, and HR all made attempts to create jobs for me after seeing the quality, value of my work and projects I did for them. After 18 months and threats to quit, I was up to $40K/yar. Less than half of what the HR team's market analysis calculated my pay should be based on our location and my role, scope, and responsibilities. I know about it because the HR director showed it to me after I'd started working with them extensively on their departmental analytics and had developed a very close relationship. She then mentioned that the COO told her, "So what?" He makes what he makes. After HR informed the COO, I was making a fraction of my fair market value. By this point, my self-confidence had started to reestablish itself, and my resentment of my department boss and COO had festered into a roiling fire. Then I did a favor for the warehouse manager. I built an Excel access time and attendance tool since the one we'd been using didn't work well for warehouse staff. It was super accurate, handled OT, and respected the big labor laws around lunch requirements. In vetting the accuracy, I found that the company was applying CA law to stores in every state. I saved the company $75K/year when I called it out. In an attempt to get to my HR established market rate, I asked for a bonus pay increase for having saved them 2x my salary per year. Their reply, "Saving the company money is part of your job. If you ask for a raise again, you'll be written up and possibly fired." I'd had enough. I found another, much better job at a niche distributor in the industry, and on my way out contacted the DOL and informed them, with receipts, of severe wage theft by the company, employer intimidation and retaliation against whistleblowing, wage job discrimination against several employees and myself. The company was forced to pay $2 million in back pay and $3 million in fines. Morally, nothing wrong with what I did above. The morally questionable part is meticulously breaking all automation I'd created 3.5 months before I left. All of the, now business-critical reporting I'd built was hard-coded, no formulas. When they asked me to train someone to take over, I said no problem. Trained him to do it manually, which took 20-30 HRs/week versus 1-2. A few months later, the HR director let me know my job was posted again at $95, $110K/year. I notified the DOL and shared all the documents of my responsibility, market adjustment requests, the HR job analysis, and an email comment from the COO that she didn't feel I was worth market rate since I have only one arm. I never saw a cent, but the company was, again, fined substantially, and the COO was immediately fired. Story 3. I don't have a problem admitting it in real life because the statute of limitations has long since expired. But my boss at a PC repair shop emptied the payroll account to buy himself a brand new BMW. So all of his employees quit. But I decided that if he wasn't willing to pay me in money, he damned sure was going to pay me in inventory. So I walked out with enough parts to build me a new PC, somewhat more than my paycheck would have been. But PC parts don't pay the rent, so I charged a conversion fee. Story 4. Once when I was like 8, I killed a tadpole in a puddle on a rock formation on vacation somewhere by hitting it with a stick. Instant remorse once I noticed it died. My dad died, not long before that, also when I was 8. That crap was a nasty-ass revelation. The inner turmoil maimed me. I'm sorry, Tadpole. I'm almost 36 now. I wish it was me and not you. Story 5. Was working in a warehouse as an order filler. Was all the way in the back of a freezer when I suddenly became very sick to my stomach. I raced as fast as I could to the nearest bathroom, but before I could get all my layers of clothing off, it was too late. I was a mess. I went to my supervisor and tried to gently convey what was going on. His words were, "Just clean up and get back to work." He said this multiple times as I tried to explain why that wasn't an option. Was told I would receive points for leaving. I got so pissed off at the situation that I took all my soiled clothing, locked it in my locker with a personal lock, and never went back. To whoever had to clean that mess, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. And to my old supervisor, you suck. Story 6. Drugged my stepdad when I was 14 with Ambien in his drink because my Nana told me to. He was a violent man, but When I say he slept for 2.5 days, I mean it. Story 7. Third grade in the 80s, the teacher found a Playboy centerfold a few of us had been passing around. We all blamed a kid that never saw it. He got paddled 7 times in the hallway outside, screaming and begging like he was being murdered. Half the school could hear. Wherever you are, Stephen, I'm sorry. Story 8. Was let go from my first job for making my boss look bad for finishing daily tasks too quickly, and being open about the division not being efficient. He made an example of me so others would back off. So when the company asked me to come in for an exit interview, I told them I had nothing to say but to follow my boss outside at lunch to the parking lot if you fancy an interesting view. He was arrested for possession and distribution of substances, got a year in jail, and life pretty much ruined. I bumped into him about 3 months after he was released while walking around a mall, and he told me I ruined his life, which I then came back and said, "You had me fired for trying to make the company better, cheers." Felt bad he got the year in jail and looked like hell, but Story 9. In my early 20s, our apartment got burglarized. Most of what they took wasn't very valuable, but I had 2 silver pocket watches I inherited from my grandpa that probably would have fetched $3,000 combined. The problem was that my renter's insurance policy limited jewelry losses to $1,000. Conveniently, my roommate had lost a really expensive 35mm camera, and his insurance policy only covered $1,000 for it. He also worked at a computer store, so I gave him documentation on one of the pocket watches, and he gave me a backdated fake receipt for a computer. We were both able to adjust our claims and get extra money out of our insurance companies to help with our losses. Thank God we used different insurance companies at the time. Story 10. I wrote somebody's master's thesis for money once. Some poor employer hired that guy who knows very little about anything. I wouldn't do something like that again, but at that time in my life, I felt like I needed the cash. Story 11. When I was 10, I sat next to a boy in class who was stinky and unkempt. His clothes were musty, he had a lot of dandruff, and almost daily he had a boiled egg sandwich. One day, I had a bit of an upset stomach and I let off a fart in class. Silent but deadly. When it hit everyone and they smelt it, they assumed it was this boy and started to move away. I moved away with him and pretended it had been him. He knew it was me, and I knew he knew, and I never apologized or corrected the record. Story 12. A guy I hired to be my replacement turned out to be a total asshole, showing his Prince Albert to coworkers and guests that didn't want to see it, throwing things at the cooks to get them to cook faster, stealing merchandise, doing SEAC and drinking on the clock, berating the staff. The company had me come back to cover his shifts so they could fire and replace him. The guy's girlfriend's housemate and friend was a coworker. She said they were gone and she had access to his car. After work one night, we all get tipsy and decide to go with it. We opened the car and found a bunch of stolen merch. People started peeing in it everywhere. One girl tried to take a crap in his cess-courts. None of that seemed good enough. I mean, she didn't actually crap in the cess-court. That would have been enough. So I took some halibut from the freezer of her house, popped off the panel on the door threshold, driver's side, cut a slit in the carpet, slid the fish in, and popped the panel back on. Couldn't even tell and took less than 2 minutes. All my coworkers watched over my shoulder. Damn, man, diabolical! Much rejoicing and drinking ensued. A few months later, I returned to visit and ran into a former coworker. Hey, whatever happened to his car? Holy duck, you don't know? Okay, so after you left, we ended up having a small spring heat wave. His car looked like the sloth kill from Sis7 and a dozen or so air fresheners hung from his ceiling. He was driving around with his head out the window like Ace Ventura. He had his car detailed 4 times and of course it never got better. Then his girlfriend detailed the car, and when she got to the spot where the fish was, she pressed on it with the vacuum and maggots started erupting from the carpet. They figured a mouse got in and died. Pretty satisfying revenge for ducking with my colleagues and regulars that I really liked. Story 13. I told my grandmother that I needed $300 for an abortion, but in reality, I wanted it for substances. She gave it to me and never said another word about it. That was 20 years ago. I've been clean for 2 years now, and I think about that lie every single day. I'll never forgive myself. Getting clean has been hard. Real hard. But finding the strength to forgive myself for all of my wrongdoings has been monumentally more difficult. Honestly, most days I just want to give up. Much love and thanks to everyone for reminding me we're all human and equally capable of both greatness and horrors. Story 14. Wipe the hard drive on the work desktop. Every tool, spreadsheet, database, and how-to guide required to do the job just gone in a blink. I literally wrote the book on how to do that job, and how the training is delivered and systems implemented across the entire company, most of which I had to do in my own time as it was seen as a waste of time. I effectively automated processes that took hours to do manually and brought efficiency from 13% to 98%. And yet when the time came to give me the promotion they promised, they brought in someone new to the company and said that I had to train them, pulled the plug on the operation, and handed in my notice. The department folded less than 3 months after I left as no one knew what they were doing and had no backup or go to help anymore. A little corporate espionage, but duck 'em. Story 15. I had a professor in college that I despised. He despised me as well. He was a hateful, angry old codger. I was a git college kid. One night, my friend and I dressed up in all black, because that's not suspicious, and snuck up to his vehicle, putting little BBs in each one of his tires' intake valves and recapping them. The next morning, sure enough, he had 4 flat tires. This was in 2004 or so. Otherwise, some doorbell camera would have definitely caught our tomfoolery. Story 16. When I was in high school, I dated a boy who was horribly abusive and ended up cheating on me with my best friend the night before my senior prom. Also found out he had been cheating on me pretty much the whole time via the Meet Me app. I obviously dumped him. A few months later, I found out he was already dating another girl, so I created an account on Meet Me and proceeded to pretend to be someone else for multiple months, get him to virtually cheat on his girlfriend at the time, and send her all of the evidence using a fake social media account. Sorry, girl. He would have done it anyway. Story 17. In 3rd grade, I cheated on my history exam. In 4th grade, I stole my Uncle Max's toupee and I glued it on my face when I was Moses in my Hebrew school play. In 5th grade, I knocked my sister Edie down the stairs and I blamed it on the dog. When my mom sent me to the summer camp for fat kids and then they served lunch, I went nuts and I pigged out and they kicked me out. But the worst thing I ever done, I mixed a pot of fake puke at home and then I went to this movie theater, hid the puke in my jacket, climbed up to the balcony, and then I made a noise like this. Hua, 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 hua. And then I dumped it over the side, all over the people in the audience. And then this was horrible. All the people started getting sick and throwing up all over each other. I never felt so bad in my entire life. Story 18. My friend confided in me that her dad was adducing her. She cried and begged me not to tell anyone. I was scared, sad, and wanted her to trust me with this big secret, so I didn't tell anybody. A year later, her dad got caught. No idea the circumstances. And he was arrested and sent to prison for a long time. I feel so bad about it. If only I had told somebody, told my parents, told a police officer or something, I could have saved her from another year of torture. I can't bring myself to talk to anybody about it. I don't know how to forgive myself for that. Story 19. At 18, I was a well-paid $10,000 USD a week, plus a free mother-in-law suite with all utilities and groceries covered. Boy toy to a sugar mama for a period of time. She offered it to me to keep me in her life because I was unable to commit to a relationship because of various stressors. She was pretty lonely too. Her only request was sex or cuddling on a daily basis. I had no issues with daily cuddling and sex. She could make a dead man pitch a tent because she was sexy. I'm not saying that it's right or even acceptable or that I'm even proud of it. The biggest reason I did it was to get out of my very toxic parents' house. I've always felt like I took advantage of her loneliness to my advantage. There is a happy ending, no pun intended, to this story. Once my stress disappeared and we got to know each other super well, we did end up in a very loving relationship. Story 20. Back when I was 14 and in school, I was the altar boy, teacher's favorite pupil. Everyone thought I could do nothing wrong. One day, while fooling around with friends, I drew an erotic art and left it under the desk. A teacher found it and escorted me to the principal. Out of fear of them calling my parents were strict AF back then, I lied to the principal that it was my friend to do it. Of course, they believed me since I could do nothing wrong. Poor chap's parents got called to the school and he received a severe scolding even when he was saying it wasn't him, but me. Despite the ordeal, we still remained very good friends till we went to college and we lost contact after that. Hey friend, I'm sorry for throwing you under the bus for a mistake I made. I hope you can forgive me. Story 21. This probably isn't technically the worst I've done, but I stole some of my stepmother's son's stuff after he died from incurable disease and pawned it so I could get high. I've been sober for 5 years now, and I still don't feel too good about that. Story 22. Several years ago, I had a coworker who was a gigantic asshole. Manic, aggressive, a nightmare to work with and even be around. I had anxiety coming into work, and myself and others spoke to our boss numerous times regarding his behavior. Unfortunately, the guy happened to also be one of the smartest people I've met, and also the most productive person on the team. So my boss, who didn't really care about team culture or morale, was reluctant to let him go. I finally had enough, both of the job and this idiot, so I started needling him and intentionally provoking him. I began documenting his behavior and had a whole folder set up. I left this company a few years ago. When I left, I went to HR with everything I had. Turns out this wasn't the first time someone had done what I did, or even the second. My old boss and coworker got fired because there were at various points incidents that presented threats to physical safety, and HR had seen enough and wanted to save face. I learned that a lot of other crap went down with some other team members, and at one point he threatened a female coworker with assault. The guy ended up died shortly after. The company was sold off, gutted, and rebranded as a department of a larger corporation. I still to this day do not feel an ounce of remorse. Duck that guy in corporate America. Story 23, I put my dog down. He attacked our other dog, hurt him pretty bad. Couple of weeks went by and he did it again this time with us there. The victim dog did nothing, and the aggressor dog was trying to kill him. We yelled, "We hit him!" I finally had to jump on him and choke him until he let go. My wife at the time was pregnant, and I couldn't have this happen when I wasn't around. I was highly emotional as I put him in the truck and drove to a secluded place. When he was sniffing a tree, I put a bullet in him. Hardest thing I've ever done. He was my best friend. This dog slept next to me every night, sat with me every day. It was years ago, and I still have guilt. Story 24. My wife died in front of me, gunshot to the head. I called 911 and panicked. The operator told me to put a towel on the bleeding. I got a towel but couldn't bring myself to do that. There was so much. I cowered, panicked more, and ended up going outside until the police showed up. Till death do us part, but I left her before she died and didn't try to help her. So now I live with that. I know I couldn't change or save her, but I could have been better and what she deserved her husband to be in her final moments. I wasn't. It sucks to know you failed morally. Story 25. I didn't give an employee a substantial pay raise that they deserved because he was annoying. I had accepted a demotion to get a transfer because my wife was pretty miserable living where we were living. I was given a team of approximately 15 to manage as their current leader was due to retire. And since I was previously the same level as his boss's boss, I had a lot of pull. Most of the team was either overdue for a promotion or underpaid compared to other employees with equivalent job title, experience. The first major change I made was to address this by pushing through promotions and bringing everyone up to 98% expected pay. This takes me to John. He's very pretentious and struts about like he's the #1 employee on the team. I can honestly say he's one of the few employees I've had who I simply do not like as either an employee or a person. He sends me emails constantly snitching on his peers, reporting back to me things like mistakes they made, things they've said, times he's caught them slacking off, etc. The whole team, him included, also believe he gets paid far more than they do too. He doesn't. He was being paid about 70% expected pay. During the first meeting I hold after taking over, there was a 3-week transfer period between me joining the team and the previous manager's retirement. I mentioned that I'm going to sit down and have one-on-ones with everyone, and mention that pay will be included in the conversation. He interrupts the meeting to say it's inappropriate to talk about pay with coworkers and against policy. I've heard him saying the first part a few times already. He's clearly very private about his pay. I inform him that I'm not discussing his pay with anyone except him and Har, and he doubles down, saying it's inappropriate for he and I to discuss pay. I try to explain to him that, as his manager, if he wants to get paid more, we're going to need to talk about it, and there is nothing he can tell me about what he makes that I don't already know. This only pisses him off and he refuses to drop it over the next few days. Rumor starts to spread that I'll be handing out pay raises and he's losing his mind. He just won't stop telling everyone. It's against policy. So I hold a quick stand-up explaining that it is illegal for a company to prevent employees from talking about pay. I come to learn that he's pretty weird about certain things and gets worked up often, but I'm being told that he's never been this worked up before. We have our one-on-one, and the entire time, he keeps telling me it's not okay for me to talk to him about pay and performance and how he wants his career to develop. I make an honest attempt to talk about his pay raise, but he threatens to go to HR if I don't stop, so I stop. I had a letter explaining that his pay was going to be adjusted from approximately $80K to $105K, but decided he wasn't getting it. I went to HR and explained that his behavior during our one-on-one reflected so poorly on him that I was rescinding his adjustment. A week later, he complained to her that everyone on his team got a large pay raise except him. Story 26. When I was a young and new driver, a car in front of me kept swerving to keep me from passing them. When I was finally able to fly past them, I threw my drink at them. Unfortunately, their window was open and my drink soared right in. Unfortunately, it was an elderly woman. She didn't wreck or anything, but God, I have felt bad for that ever since. Story 27. My roommate saw the guy who had just broken up with me the day before, due to not being ready to date yet and needing to find himself, on dating apps. His bio said, "I've been working on myself for 2 years and now I'm ready to work on us. Ready to share my life with the right one." I created a fake profile while ugly crying in my bed, using screenshots of hot nurses wearing face masks and scrubs, and using screenshots of a friend of mine who lives thousands of miles away and who doesn't have social media anymore. He matched with me within minutes because I made my filter only 1 year of age and saw him quickly and swiped right so he'd see my profile. I proceeded to be the most vapid and selfish texter on the planet, dragging his amateur drawings, telling him the dinner he cooked and sent me a photo of looked like dog crap, and questioning his ability to sexually satisfy me due to his looks and insecurity. I was an asshole. I genuinely worked hard to be the polar opposite of my actual personality and conversation style. I genuinely thought I'd just be a bit rude to him and that it would make him mad and unmatch with me. Did he? Damn, no. He ate it up. I began to feel flooded with shame due to literally nothing rude or shallow that I said seeming to push him away. I felt secondhand embarrassed for him putting up with such ducking terrible treatment. I began to worry about his mental health if he lets people push him around like this, wondered if he had a degradation kink, and also worried that this man is raising small children because he clearly has extremely bad judgment. I also could not stop thinking about how I wasted my time with him and feeling ashamed of myself for even caring that he ended it now that I saw I didn't know him at all and could never respect him. He was so thirsty that he'd ask me to come over and have sex with him right after I'd said he wasn't hot enough to schedule a weekend date with. He invited me over for sex, sight unseen, while his children were asleep in their beds down the hall. That was the moment where I suddenly was flooded with disgust at myself. I unmatched with him and blocked his phone number and honestly cringe anytime something reminds me of him. I did a ducked up thing, but genuinely nobody could ever have convinced me he was so wrong for me if I hadn't seen him slavering over a fake profile of a fake woman who behaved like narcissistic trash, who gets pleasure from humiliating others. I should also add the detail, that one. I was much better looking than him in two. Better in bed than he was, to the point where he would express that he'd never had such hot sex in his life. So often it made me feel weird. In the off chance that you're imagining that he was only putting up with her verbal abuse due to her hotness, or that he had lied to break up with me due to my looks or the sex being disappointing. I feel like those details are important in understanding just how weird the entire thing was. Do I feel bad about doing it? No. Do I feel disgusted that I'd stoop so low for someone so unattractive to me in personality and values? Yes. Story 28. When I was in junior high, my biology teacher was a real pain in the ass and the most dreaded teacher of the school, including high school, with a long history of devouring uncompliant students. I was not a straight A student, but wasn't a flunker either. I must have been between B+ and C+, pretty average. But my sister was the honor roll student and shooting to be the valedictorian. Our principal was an old pushover lady who adored my sister. During the school year, the biology teacher ordered us, because asking wasn't in her vocabulary, and I am quoting her, to do an outline of every single chapter of the biology book we used during the school year. I've always been anxious, and I didn't know exactly what to put in, so I ended putting in everything and made the chore a huge burden for me emotionally and work-wise. So I decided to stop doing the dumb thing. However, I liked biology. I've always been a natural at that. I had an A+ on every single term and exam. However, she disliked me because of that, and disliked my sister because she was very well studied and was going to go for the valedictorian, and no student of hers had ever gotten a valedictorian with an A+, and my sister did get an A+ over arguing for a missing point on a wrong answer. Got sidetracked, sorry. So these outlines or essays were worth 40% of our grade, and if you had to turn in the whole notebook by the end of the year for the teacher to check it out on the day of the exam. So since I didn't have the notebook done, I came into the exam room, gym, because she didn't want anyone cheating on her precious test. Yes, she was that nuts. And told us to put the notebook at an assigned place on the gym stage. I showed the notebook I always carried for the classroom and let me through to take my test, but hid the notebook when she wasn't looking. Later, after the test was done and all the notebooks had been taken away, I went into the gym and retrieved my notebook. That was a Friday. On Monday morning, I was coming in to take another test, and she was waiting at the entrance of the school with an "I'm so happy to tell you this" smirk and said, "You failed biology," and asked, "Why? Did I do that bad on my test?" And she said, "Oh no, you passed your test with flying colors, but you didn't turn in your notebook." But I did turn in my notebook, then how in the world would you let me take the test? She got flustered and said, "Well, the notebook wasn't there, and if that's the case, it is because you didn't turn it in. What if you misplaced the notebook or lost it? Would I get all as on biology if I was a bad, irresponsible student? I'm taking this with the principal." So I spoke with the principal, and the principal saw no flaws in my logic, and by all means I was the brother of this year's valedictorian, and my grades were impeccable. The biology teacher had no way to prove I had lied, but couldn't prove she was telling the truth either, because she let me in and saw the notebook. So basically, that has been the most dishonest thing I've ever done in my academic life. If you don't think that is too bad, let me state my profession. I'm a physician. Story 29. I deleted the files to a project I had spent the last year working on when I found out that I was going to get let go at the end of the project. Basically, they had hired me to do this project and planned to fire me when they no longer needed me. Not that I was actually told this at the time of my hiring. So yeah, when I got word from other office staff that I was to be let go, I took my company laptop home and I wiped everything. When they fired me the next day, little did they know, all of that work was gone. They had just the bare bones of the project and had to have someone else completely rebuild it in AutoCAD. Story 30. I used to work for a network of hospitals on the financial side. Due to some internal screw-up, a lot of calls ended up getting forwarded to me that shouldn't have. Things from patients calling to schedule appointments to important legal issues. For months, I continually raised the issue of my personal cell phone getting forwarded a lot of important calls. The issue was never resolved. Anyways, a few months after the call forwarding thing started, the the company decided to terminate my employment. We had a difference of opinion. I didn't like working 6 days a week, and the company thought I should be working 7. However, the calls never stopped getting forwarded to my phone. Due to the unhappy breakup, I started just blocking all the calls getting forwarded to me, and I never bothered to respond to a single voicemail or call I received. Additionally, I got some pretty important legal calls that, if not responded to in a timely manner, would cost the company significantly. I never forwarded on or explained anything to anyone, and I deleted the voicemails and moved on. I know eventually stuff probably got figured out, but they had months to figure out their call issues and never did. Hopefully, them facing legal blowback got them to fix things. Story 31. In college, I carried on a 2-year affair with a married woman twice my age. I knew going into it she was married, but I kept telling myself, it's not my marriage, so I didn't care. I've never admitted it out loud, though, to my social circle, because I know they would see me a little differently, as I've always been seen as the moral compass of the group. Story 32. I lived in a nice neighborhood, and we lived next to one of the local judges, who had to get up very early, and was very sensitive to the noise we made in our house. They were nice people, but very directly and politely requested we keep the dogs quiet and no loud music after 10 p.m. Totally reasonable. One day in the garage, our 2 dogs found a raccoon and chased it into a large cubic cutout in the concrete floor that is used for the main water line. It was like 14 inches wide, 2 feet deep, and had a huge maze of pipes in it, but the raccoon hid all the way down there, and the dogs were going ducking app crap at 1 a.m. Me and 2 of my siblings were trying our hardest to get the dogs quiet, but the only way was to get rid of the coon. We tried grabbing it, but it was very aggressive, so in our sleepy panic, we decided the only way was to kill it. We didn't want the cops called on us for noise ordinance, not uncommon in the neighborhood. We had no idea how to kill it, so we all grabbed different tools. I took a shovel and I pinned its neck down. My brother taped a large knife to the end of a broomstick, and my sister waited outside with a medieval replica spiked club. No joke. She collected cheap replica weapons as a hobby. My brother killed it, and the moment I looked in its eyes and felt the shovel against its neck and watched it dying, I immediately felt sick to my stomach. I reasoned that this was still the most logical method given the circumstances, but it was just a pest that needed exterminated right until I pinned it down. It was a horrible feeling, but I really didn't want to get in trouble. My parents were angry, and I had been kicked out of the house for less. Once we did enough damage, we got a towel, grabbed it, threw it outside, and my sister finished it off. They were younger than me, and they didn't really understand what was going on, but since I was the oldest, it hit me hardest. I still wish I could go back and find a better way to resolve it, but I just still can't think of a better way. The dogs wouldn't stop barking even in the house until they knew it was out of the garage. That still bothers me, but it was like 15 years ago. Young brains don't come up with the best ideas. Story 33. When I was a kid, I had a screened-in back porch I hung out on. Just outside the screen, I had a trampoline. One day, I was sitting on the porch reading and saw that a frog was hanging out in the middle of the trampoline. I then noticed that a little 4-foot snake was working itself up one of the trampoline legs, and just as it succeeded in getting to the top, the frog realized the danger and hopped off the trampoline onto the screen mesh in front of me. The snake followed and got close, clearly desperate for a meal. Being the little 8-year-old crap I was, I simply flicked the frog's belly through the screen, and the snake caught the flying frog mid-air and began swallowing it. The frog, maybe a toad, swelled up with air and then proceeded to let out a morbid whistle-like shriek as it was slowly swallowed. I'll never forget that sound. Story 34. When I was in my early teens, my brother and I were shooting airsoft guns in our backyard. We saw a lizard start crawling up the side of the house, and he bet me that I couldn't hit it. Brotherly rivalry blinded me, and I went for it. I was able to hit it first try. Figured I'd miss since it was about 20 meters away. Killed it instantly. I walked up to it and felt instant regret. 0.18 years later, I still feel remorse killing that lizard. Sorry, lizard. I'm torturing myself emotionally in repentance 18 years later. Story 35. My brother owed me $200 that I lent him when I was 16 years old. I busted my ass helping a friend of my dad's lay tile for half my summer vacation. As soon as I got paid, my brother hit me up for money. Fast forward several months, still hadn't been paid back. I snagged $20 from his wallet to buy pizza for my friend and I. Never saw that $200, never saw back most of the money I lent him. Finally learned my lesson last year and went no contact. I'm 35 now. Story 36. I had a sex with woman I wasn't even attracted to, who my best friend had strong romantic feelings for no other reason than I was drunk and depressed and thought maybe a little sex will give me a morsel of a dopamine hit. It didn't. I woke up the next morning in the same house as my friend was in. The 3 of us had been hanging out and drinking together late into the night, and I was so drunk that when I woke up in bed with this girl, I thought to myself, oh, crap, I better get out of this bed or he's gonna hate me. But then I'm like, you know what, duck it? I went back to sleep, and of course my friend woke up next and realized I was in bed with her. This is a friend who's been with me since I was 6 years old. It was the most pointlessly selfish thing I've ever done in my life. It's the equivalent of stabbing someone to rob them of $2. I gained basically nothing from it. I still hate myself for it 11 years later. And fun fact, that happened a whole year before my rock bottom of depression and junkie behavior. Story 37. This probably the only time and place I will ever confess this. I studied in an international school in India. When I was in middle school, I would never take a crap outside of my home. One time, I had an upset stomach and couldn't hold it in. It was pee and everyone was out doing some sport or the other. I went into the equipment room, took my pants off, bent forward, and just shat it all out straight into my underwear. It was horrendously slimy. As dread filled me, I desperately smeared my crap-stained hands, ass, and thighs over everything I could, trying to get it off. The basketballs, volleyballs, nets, the walls, the door, everything. There was crap everywhere. I kid you not. Like Kill Bill, but replaced the blood with crap. Realizing I couldn't do much, I made a last-ditch run to the bathroom, butt naked and smeared in crap. Crap, filled underwear in hand. No one saw me. I dumped the trunks of glory in the bin and washed my sins away. Ran back to the equipment room, wore my pants, went straight back to pee like nothing ever happened. During class, appointed to a friend, of mine, and publicly announced that he wasn't wearing underwear. He never does. Everyone had a laugh. I thought that was the end of it. The next day, the principal walked into the class along with the cleaning lady. They said someone had destroyed the entire storage room and sports equipment and figured it was one of us. They brought in my trunks of glory, and I dreaded that it was all over for me. They asked the one responsible to step forward, else everyone would get punished. No one volunteered. Neither did I. All the guys got whacked twice with a bamboo cane twice and were punished to kneel in the school corridor for the rest of the day. While kneeling, someone pointed out that Y wasn't wearing underwear the day before, and everyone connected the dots. I confirmed the observation. No one had pee for a month, and the news that Y had shot himself and ruined the pee equipment spread like wildfire. He denied it all, but no one believed him. Everyone avoided him like the plague. Every single girl blocked him on Orkut and then Facebook. I was one of his few friends. He eventually changed his name after school. We are still great friends, and when we get together with our old school friends, people still mock him. He's now a gym rat with a six-pack, and his confidence levels are crazy. He still doesn't know it was me. Story 38. Mother-in-law is horrible. She's also super paranoid about people getting her information, like her email and phone number. She thinks they can steal her identity super easily with those two things. She pissed me off yesterday, so I signed her email up for Trump's website and his newsletter and to get information on Scientology and a few conspiracy sites. She panicked when she got the emails, thinking they were trying to get her. I just shrugged and said, well, places can sell your information. Nothing to be done, but she's been freaking out and I find it hilarious. Story 39. I was hired on to work in a music/movies section of a bookstore over a decade ago. I had previously worked at a music/movies/video game store. And film is kind of my specialty, from keeping tabs on upcoming releases to making great recommendations for people after they tell me what kind of movies they like. Glowing interview, lots of enthusiasm, all that jazz. I was told that the department head was leaving soon and that I'd be a escort in to replace her. So I'd start as just an entry-level position, but within a month I'd be a section lead with a pay bump. She was gone within 2 weeks, and I was one of 3 people who actually worked in the department specifically, and I was there more than the other 2. After 2 months, it became very apparent that the promised promotion was not coming. And shortly after, the general manager flat out told me that they had decided to simply not have a department lead because they didn't need one. Over the course of the next 3 years, I walked out of the store with 3 brand new Blu-rays wrapped up in my jacket, tucked in my pocket, stuffed down the front of my pants, etc., and never got caught. I stole over 400 movies and box sets. And when I did the math at some point recently, I realized that I'd gotten away with roughly $14K worth of films to add to my collection. I figured that if they were going to banana me around and not give me the promotion that I signed on for, not to mention lots of bullcrap they foisted on me after the fact, that I was going to get mine somehow. And when they gave me free reign of a closed-off department full of things that I loved which were easily stolen when one had access to the device that deactivated their security tags, they never suspected it was me. And it actually amused me quite a bit because after a while I was the only person left working in that department, so if I wasn't on shift, nobody was watching it or maintaining it. So when I came on shift and noticed that we had a dozen or so things missing from stock that we should have had, it was chalked up to them not having coverage to prevent it. I still don't feel the least bit bad about it because they lied to me. And over the years, they really treated me like crap in various ways. I would have gladly bought everything I stole with the extra money I made had I been given the promotion they promised, but they didn't. Story 40. When I was about 11 or 12, my parents let me have a slingshot. I'm pretty sure they gave it to me, but it's been 25 years, so maybe not. I used to live by the woods, and we had all sorts of animals in the yard. One time, I wanted to see what it would really do if it hit one. I took a rock, and I shot it from maybe 8 feet away, a bird sitting in its nest in a tree. I hit it square in the head. It fell out of the nest and hit the ground dead. Same as the story above, I felt immediate remorse. Beyond that, when I looked into the nest, there were 3 eggs. Not knowing what to do, and in fear that my parents would punish me severely, I never told anyone. I went back to the nest each day to check the eggs. They never hatched. I thought the remorse I felt from killing the mother was bad. It wasn't until I was a little more removed from the event that I started to feel the real shame of not owning up to what I had done and maybe saved the babies somehow. I still think about it 25 or so years later. Now, I value all life. I won't let my spouse kill spiders, and I always try and speak up for the defenseless. I also own my actions and try to always be accountable for their impacts. It was a tough life lesson, but I'm proud of the person it made me into. Story 41. When I was around 8, 10, I was riding my bike with friends. We stopped at an apartment building, 5 floors, to wait for one of our friends. My friends started talking about a girl, about how much they dislike her. I had no idea who they were talking about, but didn't want to be left out, so I joined and started saying mean things like how stinky she was and how ugly. And I think I even called her a pig or something like that. I was saying all that very loud, basically shouting, to make sure I'm louder than everyone else, so my friends would hear me and laugh, and they did. Well, it turned out we were waiting for my friend under that girl's window, like exactly under it. The window was on the 2nd floor, but it was hot outside, so it was open. Needless to say, the girl heard everything. Her mom had to come down and send us away because she was crying so hard. Wish I could go back beat my stupid 8-year-old self. Story 42. Blackmailed my former boss after I was let go. He was stealing wages from his worker, myself included, but I never told any of my former coworkers because I hated them all. He paid me all my back pay, and overtime he had skimmed on the promise that I wouldn't tell anyone else at the company. Story 43. I was an IT guy. A conversation came up where we were talking about how easy it would be for a hacker to take most networks that have public-facing Ethernet jacks or devices if they wanted to. I mentioned that all you need is to find a publicly accessible IP device like a printer, go in the config, and set the IP address to static and set it to whatever the default gateway for the network is. It will cause a conflict and essentially take out the whole network. My coworker, who was senior to me, didn't believe it would do anything, so he said to try it. Knowing it would, I did it. At first, it didn't seem to do anything. Then a few minutes later, we get a call from help desk asking if there's network issues because they're getting flooded with calls. Not only did it take down the entire network for the whole company, but it somehow also killed our FSMO domain controller. The OS instance was basically trashed. You couldn't do anything in it. I don't remember exactly the nature of it. I think it would basically lock up and not let you do anything. And if you disabled the network for that VM, it would then work again. It took a few days to recover from that, since we had to build a new DC, then coordinate with all the other buildings people to register that DC as the new FSMO one. So it talks to them, and we couldn't unregister the old one properly, which also caused issues. It was a huge, tedious task, and basically involved a few days of disaster recovery, all because of my dumb trick. So yeah, if a device with the same IP as the default gateway shows up on a corporate network, it's going to take out the whole company for a few days. Story 44. When I was in university, I told a professor that the class WhatsApp chat was making fun of her pictures, because I cared about her, and she was my favorite teacher, and I didn't want her to go through that. She ended up telling the dean of the university, and it turned into a huge investigation. Several people were given black points on their university records. Some weren't allowed to change subjects or courses, and some had to drop out. People thought it was this one girl at the university who did that, but I didn't have the heart to correct people or redirect them to someone else, and I watched her get ostracized and completely ignored for the rest of the university term because of my actions. Story 45. Stole my roommate's gambling winnings. I lived with my old roommate for about 10 years, going all the way back to junior year of college. We got along great, but he owed me some money and he was pretty bad about paying things back. He also had an online sports betting account where he won $750 off of a $20 bet by predicting the Patriots would go undefeated in the regular season in 2007, but he never cashed out his winnings. I knew his passwords, so I logged into the account and had them send a check to our address for the payout, which was slightly less than the amount that he owed me. I was the one who checked the mail every day, so I grabbed the check, endorsed it as him for deposit into my account, and took it to my bank. I don't feel too bad about that one because this online sports book had an inactivity expiration date on funds in their accounts. which my roommate was well aware of since he brought it up every so often, and my roommate's account was a month away from being zeroed out because he was too lazy to request a check. He still thinks that it just expired as normal and that the funds disappeared. Story 46. I worked as a temp for about 6 months in 2005. One of those temp assignments was at an doctor's office handling the front desk. Well, the office manager who handled billing was also the person who gave access to the computer system. I forget what program they used, but it was some combination of scheduling and accounting billing system intended for small medical practices. Well, one day I'm working the front desk and this young mother comes into the office with her baby. Apparently the baby was deaf or hard of hearing in some way, and this aunt was supposed to be treating her. I go to check the patient in, and the system flags her as being past due on billing. I told the mother, and she stated to cry and just ended up having an emotional breakdown. She told me she didn't have any money, and she'd just leave. I asked the office manager what to do, and she got giddy and said, "If she can't pay, tell her to leave and don't come back until she can." Well, that pissed me off. I felt like the mother's dignity didn't matter, and the manager was indifferent to the kid's medical needs. So I told the mother to just take a seat in the waiting room while I double-checked things. What I really did was just go into the accounting side of the system and delete the past due balance. It was a little over $300, which I guess was felony territory, but I wasn't thinking about it in those terms. I just wanted the little guy to win one. Story 47. There was a guy who was super obsessed with my older sister. He asked her out. They went on a date. She didn't want to go on another one. So him and his friends came to our door at like 2 a.m., pissed in a Dixie cup, left it leaning against the door, and then rang the doorbell. I was the only one home, opened the door, and when it tipped over, got it all over my feet. At first, we didn't know who it was. But he was an idiot and shot his mouth off at school, and so it got around, and she found out who it was and told me and my dad. So during school one day, when I knew he was in PE class, I went into the gym, pulled his backpack out of the pile while they were outside running, took it into the bathroom, pulled out his laptop, took a big, soft, smelly crap into it, closed it up, put it back in his backpack, and left it back in the gym. He never found out who it was. I kept my mouth shut until we were all out of high school. I told my sister about it when we were like 22-ish, and it's basically the reason we get along now. We hated each other growing up, but as we got older and moved out, we started getting along a little better. When I told this story, it was kind of the turning point to us becoming friendly. Story 48. Me and this girl spent a lot of time together while both of us were homeless. We were pretty destitute, but we were getting by. I'd stay at a friend's house, she'd do the same, and then during the day we'd hang out, apply for jobs, do our college homework. One day we stayed late on the beach and passed out at some point. When we awoke, it was 1 a.m. and we were completely alone. We made our way up to the concessions area in the parking lot from the beach, and my friend, on a chance, slid the window open of the concessions building. We were hungry, so both of us climbed through the window to get some drinks and some ice cream. She opened the freezer and went darb and pulled out a green deposit bag containing $200 in cash. Needless to say, we stole the money and lots of snacks. It's something I regret, but the money did get me a haircut, and I got a job not long afterwards. Story 49. Killed a guy who killed my best friend. He couldn't have been older than 19. I was deployed back in the early 2010s, and my best friend took a round to his neck. Sniper got him. We were able to locate where the guy was and made an assault into the building. We got in, and the first thing we see is some guy with his hands up saying, "Asylum." I shot him in the neck, just like he did my friend. It was entirely out of anger for all those he already had killed, and my friend. Not a shining moment, and one that taught me about myself a lot. Story 50. Thread is too old and no one will see this. But I knew a guy who's a photographer and is skeezy as hell. Champions himself as a voice for feminism and mental health and whatever. Anyway, he's also a huge creep and has harassed several women who modeled for him, even going as far as photoshopping their private boudoir shots to their business logos and ads and posting it on Twitter, among many other things. I called him out on it, and he went after my place of work, which was a church at the time, and spun a story to make himself look the victim of harassment. Anyway, he did a lot of creepy crap, and there wasn't much anyone could really do. So I took his pics from his socials and made him a few dating profiles. I catfished a bunch of the biggest grizzly bears I could find, and then set up dates for them to pick him up at his workplace. I also said I got a new number and swapped mine for his. A few of the guys I talked to, I confessed the scheme, and they were still on board for ducking with this guy. After that, I walked away. Don't know the specifics, but I do know his Twitter panic and meltdown was fun to watch. Story 51. When I was 12, I was involved in a fight with my cousin. He ended up torn cloths and a chip on his teeth. Convinced him to blame it on some street kids in the neighborhood. Story 52. Sent an unsolicited hot pic once. Never did before in my life, and haven't since. I was at a very low point and hate myself for doing it. I apologized profusely and got lucky she was cool about it. We're actually good friends now, but I still regret it. Just don't do it, guys. Story 53. I worked for a charity with an asshole manager who was both too immature and too inexperienced to actually run things as they should be. When things didn't go his way, he'd get passive-aggressive, act like a child, and blame everyone else for not reading his mind. There are many times I could have snapped, like him sending me a voice note complaining about things that aren't my job and got my husband so riled up he wanted to break the guy's legs, for example. But what really did it was when I stopped doing work that wasn't my responsibility or under the umbrella of my position, and he threw my ass under the bus because he got torn a new one by his boss because the work wasn't done. Not only did I write a very asterisk lengthy email detailing every infraction, blatant disregard for the rules and times he broke the law, I signed his ass up for not only Scientology but a JW group with his personal email because his dumbass left it signed into a work computer and I know I'd need it someday. Story 54. Boomer Karen came into the subway I was working at, being a rude to me for no damn reason. Well, it turns out she was alone in the store. As it works out, I have chronic post-nasal drip, so it's extremely easy for me to form a loogie. I got a huge one, and the second she turned her head, I dropped it in her tuna sandwich. Yes, I remember that it was tuna because this is the only time I've ever ducked with anyone's food. Covered it with the bit of dressing she asked for, and the look of her walking out that door with her tanugi sub in her bag brought a tear of joy to my eye. I'm not going to defend my actions. Just everyone reading this should keep in mind, be kind to people who are handling your food. Even if they're in plain sight, it only takes 1 second for them to do something to your food and give it to you with a smile. Story 55. I was a math tutor in college that got paid minimum wage working out of their math lab. Students would come in for help on their homework. This elderly woman taking an entry-level math course would come in often for help, and she seemed like a nice enough lady. But she was falling extremely behind on her homework, and the semester was almost over. So she asked me if I would do it all for her for a couple $100. That kind of money back then was huge for me, so I took her up on her offer. Story 56. My mom went into the hospital in 2020 for an infected spider bite. Her leg blew up like a balloon, and the site of the bite site, was deep, dark purple. I went to drop a bag with some clothes, her laptop, and a few toiletries off, getting in the car afterwards and crying a bit to top it off. I was stressing out. I finally pulled myself together enough to buckle myself in, start the car, shift into reverse, and reverse into the side of a huge SUV. I was so mortified that I drove off, crying the whole time. I pulled into a parking lot 2 miles down the road and called the security center of the hospital, crying my eyes out and letting them know what happened. I gave them all my information and told them that if anyone called looking for help, they should be sure to give out my information. Though I never ended up hearing from them, I still feel awful. I'm sure they were also having an awful day. The last thing they needed to deal with was some 23-year-old punk and the dent they caused. Story 57. About 15 years ago, I remodeled my kitchen. Got all new Samsung appliances. At the time, Samsung had a promotion that gave you a free flat-screen TV with new appliances. Filled out the offer and was sent a coupon code and went to the Samsung website to get my TV. Added the TV to the cart, and noticed when I applied the coupon code, it changed the unit price of the TV to $0 instead of adding the $300 credit to the order. Honestly, I didn't even really need the first TV, but I had to know, did they really screw up that coupon that bad? So edited the cart to add a few more TVs and checked out. The answer was yes, they really did implement the coupon that bad. Story 58. Had a boss that I used to get along with before she got promoted. After that, she was a whole different person, just very mean for no reason. I put in 1 week's notice and she started to sabotage my work. So I stepped out one day, called the anonymous harassment hotline stating she was flirting with all the men on the floor, which she was, and it made me uncomfortable. It wasn't, I didn't care that much. And it nearly put one of my coworkers in danger, which it did. I walked out that day and never came back. A week later, I hear all managers have to go through mandatory harassment training and had to have their certificate framed and in display for the whole floor to see. It felt so good, but I probably didn't need to do all that. Story 59. When we were kids, there was an empty lot field that we used to play in every day. Had a tire swing, treehouse, etc. Someone bought it and started leveling it and building a house. Once they got the foundation in and the shell of the house, we would still play in it, but the realization of losing our beloved lot devastated us and pissed us off. When they had the truck come with the concrete to pour in the bottom for the basement, that night, we all ended up throwing in rocks, sand, boulders, plants, sticks, anything we could find into the wet concrete because we hated them. One of the older teenage neighbors, who is now my brother-in-law coincidentally, told us he heard the contractors come the next day, and the guy in charge was losing his mind over the damage. I was only like 10, but I still think about it to this day. Apologies to Westcourt Fair had to shell out the money to fix it. Story 60. Killed our dog. She was old and had an issue with her lungs where fluid was getting in there. One day she really started coughing, and I could tell the way she moved that this was it. We were very far from any vet. I gave her a kiss on the head and we all said bye. Although it was difficult to do, I have no regrets. It was either watch her slowly suffocate for 10 plus mines or not. Rest in peace, girl. We miss you. Story 61. When I was 19, I was driving and accidentally rear-ended a driver who inexplicably stopped in the middle of the road halfway through her turn. Damage was relatively minor. Cops showed up to ensure we exchanged insurance info. Since I was at fault, I offered to pay cash for the repairs so my insurance premiums wouldn't increase. She agreed. A few weeks later, the DMV notified me that I failed to report an accident. A point was added to my record. I contacted the other driver, and she admitted to reporting the accident to the DMV after I paid her. Fast forward a few months, and I'm at a party at an apartment complex and see her car parked there. I described to my drunk friends what she did and left for the party. Half an hour later, this drunk guy, I don't even know, asks me to come check out her car. He keyed the crap out of it, like it needed to be fully repainted. Story 62. I knowingly slept with a coworker for 5 months who had a BF at home. I had just gone through a breakup where I had been cheated on repeatedly, and I think I wanted to feel the other side. It felt so nice to be the one that was wanted for a change that I didn't care about the other guy. The whole thing crashed and burned. She lost her job, and I came close to losing mine. The only thing that saved me was, I am calm and have never been reactive. She chose to take our reprimands as license to start drama with senior members of the firm, and she was gone within weeks. They reconciled, and she texted me a month later asking me to get back with her, which he promptly saw and broke up with her over again. In the end, I lost nothing. She lost her home and job and BF of 6 years. Story 63. As a kid, I kept some anole lizards in a jar for like a day or two, and my cousin convinced me to dissect them. I still haven't recovered from doing this. Peer pressure as a kid sucks. Story 64. My ex-husband was a serial cheater. I stayed faithful for so long, tried marriage counseling multiple times, did anything and everything to please him. The last time I caught him cheating, something snapped. I felt nothing for him except pure hate. So I decided to start cheating as well. Only, I didn't choose randoms. Over the course of a year, I slept with every single one of his close friends. I thought about telling him when we finally ended things. The look on his face would have given me so much satisfaction. However, I kept it to myself. Now, seeing him still hanging out with the very men who were so willing to sleep with his wife is all the satisfaction I need. Story 65. I used to go through my friends' homes' family cabinets when I was in active addiction. When I ran out of heroin, I would try to get my hands on opiates. ID always asked to stay the night, make up some dumb, sad lie, and then get up in the middle of the night to look for prescription pills in the homes I stayed in. I never even saved it for later. I would take everything I found within the following hour. I'm sure someone actually needed their meds, and I still feel horrible about my theft. I also stole money from purses, antiques, jewelry, just to get my fix. It haunts me, and I wish I could have acted better. I'm almost a year sober now. Story 66. I have a haunting moral dilemma from when I did nothing. Saw this guy on a crotch rocket being an asshole in heavy traffic, weaving/taunting/road raging with someone else. I passed on other side of a semi, and when I looked in the rear view, I saw a car brake. Check him, and I'm 99% certain I saw him lay his bike down and slide under the truck. Then I saw tire smoke and some commotion after. I kept driving. Didn't call anyone, didn't stop or go back to check, just went on with my life. I'll never know what happened, and it bothers me more often than I ever thought it would. Story 67. I got a superior fired at a job once because he refused to train me, because he held key knowledge and didn't want anyone to threaten his position. He was a creeper, and all I had to do was spin a tale about how much it upset me and he was gone. I didn't make anything up, but I definitely played up how much it affected me. Story 68. I once ran over a young rabbit as I was mowing the lawn. It came out of nowhere, probably a hole in the ground. The blow didn't kill him instantly. He kept looking at me straight in the eyes. I didn't know what to do, so I just left him there to die. Sometimes I can still see his eyes staring at me like if it was yesterday. Story 69. I had 2 gerbils, and the bigger one killed the other one while I was asleep. I took the gerbil and put it outside in the middle of winter to fend for itself since it wanted to be a savage. Not 5 minutes after I came back inside did I feel the regret and try to go find him, but to no avail. He was just a lil animal. He didn't know better. I still feel so guilty. He probably died a horrible death out in the wild BC. He can't defend himself. It honestly still bothers me a lot. I'm so sorry, Lil Timmy. Story 70. Was staying at a friend's house for a couple weeks. They had a crafty toilet, like it was mad gross. Little kids were using it. So I told myself I would never poop there. Lasted a couple of days, maybe 4 to 7, but I couldn't handle it. So instead, I pooped in the hole of the bathtub. Problem now was it got stuck there. You couldn't see it, but the bathroom smelled like crap. Did I ever admit to doing it? No. Will I ever? Of course not, but I'm still very close with him. Story 71. One time when I was 10, I saw a stack of Pokemon cards randomly in the towel aisle at Target, and they were all new, it looked like. I saw them and just pocketed them, not really thinking much about it. Then when I got home, I realized someone probably opened it off the shelf and just threw away the wrapper. Then I thought, oh, Crap, I stole from Target. I'm gonna go to jail. So I immediately threw the cards away. Target never found out. Story 72. When I was in active addiction, I made out with a guy just for some substances. I wasn't specifically addicted. It was more of just any substances or drink I could get my hands on at the time of being a broke 21 years old. I stopped using it and all hard substances about a year ago and have been sober from alcohol and WD for 7 months. Never going back. Story 73. I grew up in the South, and there is a love bug season. Like so many of these bugs, it looks like a biblical plague. I hate all bugs, but these are especially annoying because they are everywhere, and they won't stop touching you. I was 14, and I took my lighter and set one on fire in a moment of anger. Immediately after, I considered the fact that bugs can probably feel pain. I was flooded with remorse, and this still haunts me. Story 74. So my mom started dating this new guy. I never liked him. The worst part, though, is he had a kid, too. The kid was a mess. Sloppy, curly hair. Me and the kid were about the same age, and we couldn't stand each other. It was painful just being in the same room together. Anyway, one day when I was home alone, I placed my testicles on his drum set. Story 75. I rushed to storefront doors so I don't have to hold it open for anyone. It's not that I don't like to. It's just so awkward seeing people do a little mini sprint, and the timing is almost always off. Sigh. Then they might try talking to you, and I just really want to go in and out. Story 76. I had an abusive step-parent who regularly threatened died. At around 12 years old, after they had an argument with my parent, I saw them taking a lot of pills and understood what was happening. I left the room and asked my parent to go for a walk, and they obliged. I didn't say a word about what I had seen. Unfortunately, the pills didn't work. Story 77. Asshole ex-manager was mysteriously signed up for certain cult-like religious groups known for being persistent to the point of harassment. May have been his personal email and number. May have also gotten him severely disciplined and almost fired. Story 78. Some kid in 5th grade brought in a Charizard card his mom saved up to buy him. Before church, I ripped it into pieces and put it on his desk. Definitely the most I've ever seen someone cry. I felt really bad. Story 79. I took a magnet to my sister's Annie soundtrack tape because I couldn't listen to it anymore. It was a hard knock life every single night until I took matters into my own hands.